Hey guys, welcome. Welcome to week 5 of it is week 5 of my passion project, the Integrative Wellness Collective, and I'm super excited for tonight. Michelle Colt is my sister-in-law, but she's more than my sister-in-law. She's actually my sister in soul. And it is a concept that she and I came up with. I don't know, Michelle, how long ago was it? A few years ago, maybe, that we kind of came up with this idea.
About 2 years ago.
Right?
Yeah.
That we've known each other for 28 years, 29 years. And I see Mom just jumped on, so she might actually tell us how long we've known you and loved you. And so Michelle and I have a bond that goes beyond just sister-in-law, right? It's not a legal bond. It's a soul connected bond. It's even more than a sisterly bond. It's almost like otherworldly bond, I think, in my experience of her and this beautiful soul. So I thought it was so appropriate to bring her on to this because she embodies wellness and she embodies just a nurturing quality. And I think it's so important that people experience her light and watch her shine, because that's something that she's created in her professional development as a coach and somebody who's really helping other people achieve their own beautiful lights and success. So Michelle is the co-owner of a workshop that started 16 years ago. It's called The Inside Game. And the Inside Game was all about getting to the root of self-sabotage, which is something that we're actually going to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of today, because it's something that I think we all deal with. And from her course in Inside Game, she morphed it into this beautiful, it's been, how long have you been doing this workshop?
About 5 years.
5 years. So Michelle does a workshop that we lovingly call Shine. And it's having the courage to let your light shine and be seen. And for so many of us, we play safe. We dim our lights. We don't allow ourselves to fully be that shining bright light that we all can be, and that we all should be in our lives, because we only got one shot at this place. So why not be your brightest self? So with that being said, I want to introduce you to my beautiful sister-in-law, my best friend, Michelle Colt.
Hi, everyone. So incredibly honored to be here with this other beautiful soul.
So I wanted to start tonight with the question for you of what does it mean, self-sabotage, and how does one actually get to the root of self-sabotage? Like, what is self-sabotage?
Love talking about this. So important. You know, I was thinking about this all day long today. And one of the things that I wanted to say before I get into any of my material is the importance of listening to this information with an open heart and a lot of self-love and compassion. Self-sabotage is a very tricky thing. And one of the really interesting aspects of it is we only self-sabotage when we're not aware, when we're in some kind of trance, when we're not present. So the first aspect of getting out of it is being able to be more conscious and present in your life. And self-sabotage looks very different from one person to the next. As some of you know that have worked with me before, and of course Bianca knows, 28, 29 years ago when I met her, I was close to 200 pounds. And about 20 years ago, I went through an on and off experience of debilitating anxiety. And one could say that my being overweight and having that anxiety was a way that I self-sabotaged. Now, one of the reasons why it's so incredibly important to be kind with yourself when you're looking at this for yourself is there's a lot of misinformation out there in the world of personal development. There's some teachings that say you can choose your thoughts. You can put yourself into a certain kind of emotional state. And that is not true. One of the things I was so excited to talk about tonight is this: your thoughts and your emotions are doing you, so to speak. Just like your hair is growing, your liver's doing what your liver does, your digestion is doing what your digestion does.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea that you are bringing bad things into your life because you're negative or you're attracting certain things is not based in neuroscience, and it's not based in even wisdom from the East, one could say. So self-sabotage comes up when people are not present, when old beliefs and patterns are coming up from the past. And of course, this definitely ties into inherited trauma in some very, very fascinating ways. Mm-hmm. So the first step out of it is the ability to be more present and to witness what's happening. I'm not saying that's easy by any means, but that's what it's about. And self-sabotage for some people can be they have a rage issue, so that when they're triggered and when they're upset, they push people away. You know, other people, it can be fear. It really varies from person to person. It's very interesting. Some people self-sabotage, let's talk about this athletically, by not pushing themselves enough. Whereas other people self-sabotage by overdoing, and then that leads to injury. So it's really interesting.
And
it really varies
also,
from person to person.
Also, I think self-sabotage can be something as simple as just procrastinating.
Oh, right? Nelly.
You know, yep. or eating too much, or drinking, right?
Absolutely.
Or self-soothing to the point where it's numbing. And
that's exactly right.
Yeah. And I think by, what happens when you experience that, you allow yourself to come out of the present moment. I mean, alcohol in and of itself is a way for you to just numb out, to not feel, right? To not
Absolutely.
experience. It's funny. It's like you see this in kids that are, having to take a test, right? They'll be watching the TV or playing on their phone versus having to study, right? Yep. Or, you work with, Hollywood actors, like they're so stressed out about maybe not getting the part that they're not going to memorize their lines.
Yep.
Or, or even for me as an athlete, maybe a race is coming up and I'm going to do everything I can to not train for it, because I'm too afraid of getting on the podium, maybe, right?
Yep.
Because maybe that's too threatening for me.
Yeah. I mean, what you're bringing up right now is so important, B, because basically so many people think that they have a fear of failure. And I'm not saying that that's not true, but oftentimes fear of failure is masking fear of success, fear of shining, however you want to say it. And a lot of times a person's dealing with both. So it's a really interesting thing. A really powerful saying comes to mind from Carl Jung. There's no greater influence on a child than the unlived lives of his or her parents. And that had everything to do with my personal self-sabotage and many of my clients. It's fascinating, just fascinating.
And, I love the acronym of FEAR, right? False emotion, false evidence appearing real.
Yes.
Right. We self-sabotage and put ourselves into that triggered space and live in the moment of that fear response. And we're reacting to that fear.
That's right. You brought up procrastination. Procrastination and perfectionism are really fear in disguise.
Interesting.
I just got goosebumps. That's a really interesting thing to be able to look at, because when my client or myself is procrastinating or turning into this, aspect of having to put so much pressure on themselves to be perfect, what I tell them and myself is, well, what are we really afraid of? Because as soon as you can identify that, because that's unconscious in the moment, the fears, you're not conscious of it.
Right.
You just think you're, playing video games or watching TV or doing whatever it is that you use to numb. The numbing things that people do, addiction, whatever it is, it's always as a way to get out of the body and to not feel what you're feeling.
That's right.
So it's very fascinating.
Yeah. So, well, you kind of, the second question that I had for you was, what was your personal or biggest struggle that you had around your own self-sabotage? And we talked about the weight, and we talked about the, how you didn't, losing the weight or being overweight for yourself was really a way for you to mask stepping into your really shining. So what other ways did you see yourself in your trajectory in your younger life versus now who you are after all the work that you've done and we've done through this inherited trauma stuff? What other ways did you see personally yourself self-sabotage?
A really interesting one that I used to deal with is I studied with a very famous acting teacher in New York City by the name of Wynn Hammond. And, the caliber of talent in that class was, I mean, off the charts. So I oftentimes wouldn't really prepare because the fear was if I really was great, something horrible was going to happen. Back then, what I was aware of was the fear that if Wynn thought I was wonderful and the other students thought I was wonderful, I would be resented. Mm-hmm. And it was fascinating because I was working on the role of Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate when I was in Wynn's class, and Kathleen Turner was doing it on Broadway at that time. And when Wynn saw me do it, he said, "You need to be seen for the understudy." It was hard enough for me to shine in class at that time. The thought of like taking the action steps to be seen by the casting director, right. I never took any steps because it was too threatening. For me, when I was younger, also it had a lot to do with my physical appearance. I had a fear that if I was perceived as pretty, women would hate me and men would hurt me. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of sabotage around that. And, it was
and that
really
would go back to your inherited trauma, as we know,
time.
and as what we kind of went through with you.
Yep.
It's interesting because looking at this even from a body perspective and being a PT and acupuncturist that work with people all the time, when they're kind of going through recovery or learning new ways of movement again because their old pattern isn't working for them, or they're injured, or they had surgery. One of the biggest questions that I get is, when will I return to normal? And my answer is always when you no longer fear the movement. When the fear is no longer present. And it's one of those crazy things where you might be, step over step getting up the stairs or step over step getting down the stairs. And then all of a sudden one day you're running down the stairs and you get to the bottom of the stairs and you're like, oh my God, what just happened? I'm healed. I'm through it. I've gone through that discomfort. So that I think is so important because it's when that fear habit is no longer there anymore. And I think just in general, not just a body sensation, but also what we're thinking about in our mind.
Okay, I have to stop you. I have to say something because what you're saying right now is so ridiculous. Okay, because basically what Bianca's saying right now is she's talking about people letting go of the story. Okay, story is what feeds our fears. Story is what feeds our beliefs. And when a human being, be it in a physical kind of thing, in terms of what B is describing and that kind of thing, when you can let go of the story, it's everything. From the moment we are born, we are conditioned away from who and what we really are. This family member wants us to be this. This part of society wants us to be that. And that's so much of what my work is about. It's about helping people to connect to who and what they really are, not these false concepts and identities. It's fascinating, and it's not easy at all. I mean, letting go of the story that we've been telling ourselves for 20 years, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 years. It's not an easy feat, but freedom is on the other side.
Right. And then also, what our ancestors were taught, and then what they taught us out of habit and and there's that epigenetic changes that occur in us so that we fit the mold of who we should be in our family or who we need to be in society. We need to look a certain way. We need to dress a certain way. We need to act a certain way. We need to be the right one. We need to be the loved one. We need to be the one that's adored. So it's like, what role do we play? And the roles that we play feed into that, how we're triggered, right? If it goes against the grain of who we really then creates all the internal chaos. So, which then takes me
Yeah,
to
absolutely. Also, just wanted to throw in there, also what you're hitting upon, hun, is that whole aspect of loyalty. Loyalty to the ancestors, loyalty to our families.
Mm-hmm. Right, loyalty to our parents, loyalty to our grandparents, and so on and so forth as we start talking about inherited trauma. But let's go back real quick about, I wanted to ask you about the comfort zone, because we talked a lot about this a few months ago, and in a lot of your courses that you teach, you talk about comfort zone and why it's so difficult to move through it. How do you define the comfort zone, and how do you see people having difficulties move through some things that don't feel right, that are icky?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay, B?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. You're very fuzzy on my end, so I just wanted to make sure that you can hear me okay. The comfort zone is a fascinating aspect of this work. 16 years ago, as Robert and I coined this aspect of neural thermostat. It's like a neural setting. Same thing as comfort zone. Okay. And we all have different conditioning in different areas. Some people are given so-called healthy conditioning around being in a happy relationship, whereas they have terrible messages around really making a lot of money doing what they love. Mm-hmm. And that's the comfort zone. And what so many people don't realize is how much resistance and self-sabotage comes up when you start to move out of your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. That's when all the chaos comes up. Mm-hmm. That's when the shit hits the fan, so to speak. Yeah. And all of a sudden someone's having panic attacks. Somebody else is having, some type of terrible digestive issues. It's mm-hmm. all tied in. Mm-hmm. So the comfort zone, you could say, is moving into a new area that's outside of what we're used to. Mm-hmm. I always say as an example with this, that certain people have been conditioned to not be treated well by their partners. You could have a woman in a relationship with a man, maybe they're married and they have children, and he may be abusing all of them, but it's really difficult for her to leave that situation for the fear of the unknown and all of that. Right. It's really fascinating, and it's having the ability with the right information and then the right processes to be able to understand what's happening in the nervous system, so to speak, and then having a way to ground and become mm-hmm. present again. Mm-hmm. That's really, what makes or breaks your ability to move out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, and if I take that from an athletic standpoint, the biggest breakthroughs that happen for someone physiologically is when they push themselves through that discomfort, right? That's when they make their biggest strides. That's when they maybe push their heaviest weight, or when they go a speed that they didn't think was possible, right? It's when they no longer are stuck in that perception of being halted. Yeah. I remember we do something called a lactate threshold test, and you're running on the treadmill and you take a little prick of blood, and you have a rate of perceived exertion. So you kind of give a number of how hard it is for you. And, you're running on a treadmill and the treadmill's getting faster. And as it's getting faster, every minute or so, blood gets taken from your fingers. So they're actually trying to look for what's known as lactate levels. And what happens first, as your lactate begins to rise, is your breathing starts to get labored. And very oftentimes when you have labored breathing, it sets up an emotional response of fear, of, oh my God, I'm hyperventilating.
Sure.
Oh, something wrong is going to happen. Now, what's fascinating is that my coach actually wouldn't let me look at the pace time. And she kept asking me, how do you feel? And I'm like, huffing and puffing. I'm like, I'm at a 5. Okay, and she cranked crank it up, right? I'm at a 7, you know, and I'm like really breathing heavy. And she took my blood lactate, and she's like, you still have more in you before this lactate rises that high. And I'm like, oh my God. So my perception of my fear, because I thought that I was going to overbreathe to death, right? I was going to hyperventilate versus what my actual blood would look like.
Yep.
And what the pace time looked like. And when the whole test was over, it was the fastest I'd ever run. But she knew that if I saw the number on the screen, that I would have shut down completely because it was way faster than what I was perceiving I could go at.
Yeah.
And having that moment of, holy crap, I can't believe I went that fast, allowed me to push through that comfort zone so much so that my neural thermostat just moved up.
That's exactly it.
And it was like this moment of, oh my God, I can't believe the struggle was real.
Of course.
But then I was able to bump up that neural thermostat. It's truly amazing, and perception is amazing. But I wanted to bring something tonight too, because I did some research today, and it is called the experiential blindness. And I don't know if ever anyone could see this. Let's just see if they could see this. Let's see if you could see this.
Yes, I can see it. That's great.
Okay, can everyone see this? Can someone give me a thumbs up? Okay. All right, so the question here is, do you know what this is a picture of? Anyone? No? Okay. So experiential blindness, right? Experiential blindness is the inability to perceive what you don't have a concept for. You ready? Here we go. Do you know what this is? Can you see this?
Yeah, now I feel like, it's a snake.
That's right. You now have the concept to see that in this. Do you see the head?
Yep.
Okay. So experiential blindness is the inability to perceive what you don't have a concept for. So right, Sadie, isn't that amazing to see that? Yes, it's a snake. So the concept here, right, is one of the things that I put out on Instagram this week of a question was, you know, what's one of the hardest things for you for living your best life? And I gave 4 answers. And the one answer that most people responded to was, I don't know how to get out of my own chaos. And I found that to be so interesting because they got stuck in here. They had no concept of how to get to here. So when you stay here is when you stay in your chaos. If you're given a concept, you can now perceive something different. And I found that to be so fascinating today when I was kind of off in my research tangent, because I love doing stuff like that. But I wanted to bring that to you in terms of, like, you know, perception and chaos, right? Because chaos is, you had such a cool definition. I remember you telling me this a few months ago.
Yeah, this is a game changer. Okay. And this has actually become a tool for me in working with people. So basically, chaos is the empty space that preceded the creation of the universe. Hello. I mean, how positive? That sounds so freaking positive, right? Now, I got to be very clear about this. The empty space that preceded the creation of the universe. It's true. It's a definition in the dictionary. The thing is, though, empty space is not perceived as empty space by the ego and the mind. Okay? The mind and the ego, for the most part, this isn't true for everyone, but for most people, it detests empty space because that represents the unknown. Okay? So the mind and the ego takes this empty space and fills it with catastrophic thinking, uncomfortable body sensations, all kinds of, you know, intense emotions or whatever it is. So what I tell people is, when you're in a situation where you're experiencing some level of chaos, remind yourself you are in the empty space that's preceding the creation of a new level in your relationship, a new level in your career, your athletic performance, your art, whatever it is. That's why it's so important to have the ability to somehow make chaos your friend.
Right. I think people that get stuck though in that empty space are flying around in all the chaos.
They are.
Yeah.
The first step is to realize that it's not a bad thing. It may be freaking uncomfortable as all heck,
Yeah.
but it's not a bad thing. And having the ability, I mean, that's conceptual for sure. And that's something you're using your intellect to be able to see.
Yeah.
It's a reframe in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it really changes your experience. And another thing I want to mention is that all of your experiences, all of your emotions, and all of your thoughts are temporary. Right. So when you find yourself in a very upsetting emotion, a crazy thinking loop, this is a tool I've been teaching for 16 years. Say temporary to it. Mm-hmm. Just identifying that it's temporary. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you the amount of feedback I get about temporary.
Yeah. You know, I did a post this week on the brain, which, you know, I'm just so amazed by, especially doing so much work in my young PT career with spinal cord injured patients and, you know, stroke patients and stuff. And to watch somebody have what we call brain plasticity, right? It's the ability mm-hmm. for the brain to different parts of the brain to kind of take over when things are not working so well. And one of the things that's so fascinating is that the brain is constantly searching for threat. And, you know, its only way that it wants us is to be in a space of constant survival. So yes. It's so, you know, our brain and our nervous system, our spinal cord, it's our hardware. So if we're a computer, the minute that hardware crashes, is the minute our survival is gone. So another fascinating physiological fact is that we only see 10% from our retina. 90% of what we see is everything else in our senses. Yep. So we're coming up with concepts of our own reality based on 10% of what we see, but 90% of all of our other senses. And we're taking our past experiences, placing them on what we're now seeing, quote unquote, seeing, and giving that a definition. Yep. So what if what we saw or experienced was wrong? We're now keep imprinting wrong things onto our reality.
Absolutely, Bea. I mean, how I like to talk about this is the mind, when I say mind, ego, is constantly lamenting about the past, then taking that past and regurgitating it onto the present moment, and then basically projecting it out into the future. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating, you know, because I did a bunch of different, you know, looking into different things scientifically when I first started teaching Inside Game with Robert. And to back up what you're saying, the amount of information that's coming in at any given moment, you know, it's a crazy amount of information in terms of bits of information. And just like you were saying, the only ones we're focusing on, the little sensorial aspects and all of that, is whatever backs up our stories and our beliefs.
Right.
That's why 6 people can see a car accident and they're all going to have a different interpretation of what happened.
That's right. 3
children in a family. If you spoke to my brother and my sister, they would have a very different experience of what our childhood was like.
Yes.
I mean, it's just so fascinating how we're all perceiving. The fact that anyone can even communicate is kind of shocking to me sometimes, because we're all coming from these different backgrounds, from these different conditionings and all of that. I mean, it's extraordinary to even be able to communicate and to connect.
Yeah.
Because one of the other things that the ding-a-ling humdinger of a ding-dong of the mind does, and the ego, is that it's constantly in the survival mode, so that, you know, we're never present, and we're constantly feeling, not everyone, but many people, alone and isolated.
Yeah,
In terms of what people have been dealing with the last year, that's one of the most horrendous aspects of it.
that's right.
The mind and the ego is constantly having people be in this perception of separateness, when
Right.
quantum physics has proved that we're all very much connected in terms of energy. So it's
Yeah.
just, it's fascinating what the mind focuses on.
Yeah. And again, going back to that fear and the inability to move forward, right?
Yep.
When you're unable to move forward, you're stuck in that quicksand of the past.
Yep.
So let's talk about inherited trauma. Let me just tell everyone, so Michelle and I, about 2 years ago, we went on this little vacation together, and little did we know that it was going to uproot, unearth, change our family dynamics, your family dynamics, my personal family dynamics, and how we perceived ourselves in the world, and all the limitations and limiting beliefs that we had about ourselves. And it all comes back to inherited trauma. And I wanted to tell the story about one of the things that I thought was really one of the most fascinating concepts, is that it was a study done on mice. And by the way, I really get very upset when I hear about animal research, but it was very poignant, this one research. And what they did was they exposed mice to the scent of cherry blossoms. And when they exposed them to the cherry blossom scent, they also gave them a little shock. And what they found over time was that any time that they were exposed to the scent of cherry blossoms, they would have a fear response, even without being shocked. And over time, the reason why they use mice is because every 1 week of a mouse's life is kind of equivalent to that of 10 years of a human life. So what they found was the scent receptors in the mice, their scent receptors to that very specific molecule of the cherry blossom became larger. So they were able to experience the scent in nanoparticles. So they were actually able to perceive the scent as a survival mechanism so that they won't get shocked. All right. Now, here's the interesting thing. They bred these mice. They bred them to 2 generations, pups and grandpups. They exposed the pups and the grandpups both to the smell of the cherry blossom without any of the electrical stimulation. Does anyone have an idea of what happened? They all had the same fear response. They had the same fear response. So what that means is, over time, epigenetics, right? Our genetic expression was a learned response from the generation that came before us, before them, before them, before them, back 7 generations. So if you think about what we experience personally, when you start looking into your trajectory of your own ancestral lineage, you can start to decode some of those cherry blossoms, right? Maybe we can look at it that way. In a way, it could be very painful to experience it. It could be very eye-opening, but on the best level possible, it becomes such a gift. And I mean, Michelle, I wanted you to talk a little bit more about that and experience with the inherited trauma piece, because I think we're all living in a trauma. We all have some sort of ancestral lineage that really, it brought us to who we are right now. We all had some sort of trauma in our lineage.
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I want to say is something that's so important. Your truth will set you free. And it can feel scary and it can feel daunting. Like, I have different clients that are questioning their moms and their dads about different things and history. Most parents like to talk about it. Some don't, for various reasons. But putting 1 and 2 together, oh my God. I have to share this story because I was thinking about it when you were talking about the mice. I have a client in Los Angeles who is, I'd say she's in her early 40s. And her entire life, she's dealt with insomnia and migraines. So she goes to every Western doctor, every alternative kind of doctor, trying to understand this insomnia and these migraines. Migraines are god awful. Can't figure it out, can't figure it out. A couple of years ago, right after Bianca and I found out about this information, I told her to get the book. She gets the book. She starts putting, there's a book out there called It Didn't Start With You. That's a beautiful book to give you a foundation of this work. And basically, she texted me one night. I was in my bedroom. I'll never forget this. And she was like, OMG, Michelle. And I said, what? I have goosebumps. She said, I found out, I never knew this, that my father's father was a night watchman at a factory. And two thugs came in one night when he was working and clubbed him to death on his head.
Wow.
Once she was able to work through that in the ways that you're able to do that with different processes, no more insomnia and no more headaches. Now that's a very dramatic example, but how powerful is that? Another thing that, you know, is absolutely incredible in this work is what we resist, we repeat.
Right.
Yes. I mean, it's like that to me is so incredible. And also, like in lineages and in the ancestral trauma, what happens is the people that were ignored, the people that were bad people in some way, that's the stuff that mainly gets repeated by the generations that come after.
Yeah.
And it can be anxiety. It's not a coincidence that my grandma had it, my mom, my sister, myself, and my daughters dealt with it. Not as intensely as we all did, but it's passed down.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of a story too that I had with a patient of mine, unrelenting back pain. You know, no matter what we did, couldn't get rid of his back pain. He's had back pain for, I don't know, 30 years. And, you know, after we finished our facilitation workshop, I came into the office and I was like, all right, I'm going to start implementing some of this inherited trauma into my actual physical practice with patients. And he's lying on the table and working on his back. And I started asking him questions about, you know, so what's the deal with the back pain? Like, do you recall anybody in your family? Is there any sort of family lineage around it? And he popped his head up and he goes, he's like, I just got nauseous. And I was like, okay, well, tell me what's the nausea? And he said, I had a flash that when I was 3, my mom was always suffering from back pain. And the only thing that would make her feel better is when I would massage it. And he had this like visceral reaction to this like experience of his own back pain. And that goes into the whole idea of, you know, merging with our parent when we're much younger to go back to that place of being safe.
Yep.
There's our safety again, right? If we could merge with our parent to make them feel like we're connected, it's going to keep us in survival. So he learned at a very young age that if he can connect to his mother by way of a pain response, he can stay connected to her that way. And what was so fascinating about that treatment was he never had back pain again after that.
Goosebumps.
It was like,
yeah,
wow.
It's amazing. You know, another thing I want to throw out there in regards to this, it's so much about the merging, not only merging, but we unconsciously think we will heal them if we take it on, you know, and this is happening at the youngest ages. You know, oh my goodness gracious, when we're babies, this is happening unconsciously. I mean, there's another incredible piece of information. So when your mother was pregnant, no, when your mother was in your grandma's womb, the seed of what would become you was there in your grandma's womb inside your mom. I mean, it's just fascinating. You know, I feel to share something from my own life around this. You know, I used to have this completely irrational fear, especially when I would get triggered, whatever my trigger would be, that I was going to end up all alone in a hospital and not be able to pay for it. My family would have to pay for it. they'd be so mad at me for having to pay for it that they would never come and visit me. I mean, it made no sense.
Right.
3 months ago, I find out that my aunt, my mom's sister, dealt with debilitating emotional issues, was in and out of psychiatric aspects of hospitals, and a doctor said to her, your family doesn't make enough money for as sick as you are mentally. Well, first off, what the hell kind of a doctor is that to say to someone? But there it was. I had taken on what had been said to my Aunt Jeannie as a way to connect to my lineage. I have such goosebumps. I never even knew this story until 3 months ago.
Right.
I was able to heal it through the process, and I have not had that fear again.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. You know, and for me, when we were on this trip together and you came upstairs and I was like, I'm on the phone with Dad, right?
Yes.
You know, I don't speak to Dad much. And,
Yep.
and it was a really interesting thing because for my whole life, I've always dealt with this feeling of intense loneliness and a feeling of almost being orphaned, which I'm not an orphan, this irrational sensation of just intense loneliness. And I called my dad, and it was really interesting when he picked up the phone. Yeah, B, how's it going? You know, I'm like, oh, Dad, how are you? Yeah, you know, I'm so lonely. And it was like this, and it was almost like I had learned what loneliness was. Yep. Because of his experience with loneliness. And when I remember when I was starting to ask my dad these questions, I had to remove myself from the emotional aspect of it because so much of it was very painful. So when I removed myself from that aspect of being emotional about it, I kind of went in like an FBI agent with a little pen and paper. And I was like, Dad, I want to ask you about, you know, your parents. And he started telling me, what about Grandpa's parents? And he said, oh, I don't know, they came here from Italy and they were like recluses. And I remember that word sounding like it was a punch in the gut because very often times I feel reclusive and I don't know what that feeling is. You know, people look at me and they're like, oh, you're super outgoing and you're, you know, extroverted. And I'm like, oh, I might seem that way, but there's part of me that's so introverted and so fears that space. It's easier for me to be in a place of reclusivity than it is for me to be shining and out there, even though I'm doing this with you and on these social media platforms live. Like it's so fascinating because I think when you can come to that realization of where you've learned these limiting responses in your life, that is the moment that you can set them free.
Yep. Yep. It's fascinating, you know, listening to you talk about that, B, in terms of, you know, your dad and that kind of thing, because what just occurred to me is that, thank goodness, I've really gotten past it for the most part, but I used to deal with debilitating shame. And as you spoke about your dad, I really realized is my dad's shame. Right. For various reasons, you know what I mean? And it's incredible, the healing and the releasing of the sabotage. You know, we could even call it sabotage because that's certainly what it is. Yeah. And it's such a incredible thing to be able to move past the sabotage, the anxiety, the loneliness, the shame, or whatever it is, you know, because it was not any of ours in the first place. Right. It's just such a game changer. I mean, my work has been about helping people with self-sabotage for a long time. And what's amazing about the inherited trauma piece in that work is I feel like so much information that's out there, so many different processes, prune, is the way I like to say it, or trim the plant of sabotage. Whereas the inherited trauma work pulls it out from the roots and replaces that place down in the earth with blessing. Hello. I mean, I have goosebumps. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And that the blessing, and it reminds me so much of like the Petri dish idea, right? You know, if you have bacteria or viruses. Oh, I said the word, we might get shut down.
Yes, be careful, don't say that word.
I'm not going to say
like
that
this.
word. That's right, the V word. If you put that into a petri dish and you put it in the dark, it's going to grow like exponentially, right? The minute you pull it out and bring it into the light, it's going to die.
Yep.
And it's the same thing for family secrets and getting stuff out there that, because the more you push down and hold the secrecy or the family shame, it becomes like a cancer growth. And I think one of the biggest things about the inherited trauma piece is that I got to have, mom's on here right now, and it's truly, growing up, mom had a very, very, very difficult life. And I was born into a tumultuous parent household.
Sure.
Mom was unhappy, dad was unhappy. So here I am, this tiny little being that came in, and it was this immediate, like, stop. Like, you can't be happy because you're in a situation with parents that aren't happy. So how do you then navigate your life for survival, right? So for me, it became just being the good girl. If I was the good girl, if I got good grades, if I, didn't run around and play in mud, if I was like always kept myself perfect and all those things, if it was always that, then I would get rewarded. And that reward was that house would be peaceful.
Yep.
Right? There would be love. I would feel loved. So, and then what happens? You learn how to survive in the world based on these experiences in your first 3-4 years of life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's wild because, that survival piece is so huge, and it's something I've been so passionate about, talking about it for years and years and years. And another important thing I wanted to mention tonight is that survival aspect, that's where the thoughts and the emotions are coming from. And I was thinking earlier today how incredibly genius it was that there was a TV show, The Survivor. I mean, that show show has gone on and on and on. I mean, it's crazy how well that show is done, because those people that put it together were smart enough to know on some level, consciously or unconsciously, that that's what's driving humanity. And that's why it's so important not to ever feel bad when you're in a negative thought or an emotion is coming up. It was reality television they just brought a whole nother aspect out, and that's why the thing did so well. And the aspect of inherited trauma and everything else, and I was talking to my hairdresser today about this, the big issue is that so many people running around this planet don't feel safe. They don't feel safe, and so that's the piece. I mean, this whole safety aspect, I've been talking about it for a couple of years, and then doing the training for the inherited trauma and all of that, it blows my mind. I did a technique at a workshop I was teaching on Sunday, woman who's worked with me for a while and doing some of the inherited trauma with me in the private sessions. And when I had the group that was on the Zoom workshop look around and notice that they were safe, she said, Michelle, I started bawling because I have goosebumps. I mean, it's like so many people, consciously, unconsciously, are never feeling safe. And that's why we're only as sick as our secrets, and we think we have to hide and all of those different things. Again, the truth will set you free. It may be a little bit, rickety and hard in the nervous system at first, right, but it will set you free, and we're only as sick as our secrets.
We're only as sick as our secrets. It's just amazing. That concept is amazing. And, who the hell has felt safe this year? I don't think any single one of us has.
Yep.
I mean, everything has been in turmoil. Our whole world has been in turmoil. So why would we feel safe?
Yep.
And then to make changes and to live your life. And, for me as a 9/11 survivor, I think one of the hardest things for me, I think when quarantine started, you want to talk about like going back into the past and projecting into the future. I was in that spiral loop of I'm lost my job again. And how do I because for 9/11 was my you know, my catastrophic life moment.
Yep.
You know, and then to rearrange my life to get through something like that, to then allow myself to get through a pandemic in a way that I got through. It was all about survival, safety, and getting past my comfort zone, right? Because, you know, as a single woman who's got to pay my own bills, who's got to take care of myself, who's got, you know, all the things, you know, I don't have anybody to take care of me. So I had to do it. There was that, like, I had to survive. And I had to make sure that my survival was on a trajectory. And that was that whole concept of, you know, making lemonade from lemons, you know?
Well, girlfriend, you did a lot more than survive, girl. You thrived. Truly.
Yeah.
I mean, truly. Also, you're touching upon one of my other favorite things in the entire world to talk about, finding the seed of benefit.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Goosebumps.
Yes.
Hello.
Every
Napoleon
adversity
Hill.
carries with it a
Yep.
seed of greater benefit.
Yeah. It's huge, you know, and it's a game changer in terms of one's sense of well-being when they're going through a bunch of bullshit and chaos.
Yeah.
You know, again, not easy, but incredibly resourceful to do that.
Well, and that's the thing, right? You know, I think one of the things that I learned about going through 9/11 and, you know, experiencing tremendous PTSD. I mean, you know, I don't know if you remember, but
I do.
like my hair, I had psoriatic patches that would bleed, and I would scratch my head and just my hair would just come out.
Yep.
And, you know, that trauma of, you know, possibly, you know, coming to your death in such a dramatic way, you know, and then bringing that into, here's that neural thermostat that we were just talking about, right? I learned that no matter how, so 9/11 happened, I get through this massive amount of trauma, my neural thermostat for trauma went up a little bit, right? So I can handle that. And now all of a sudden we're in this pandemic and I get to that neural thermostat again, and there's that perception and recognition of, wait a minute, I've been through this before.
Yep.
So I can allow myself to go down the rabbit hole of feeling sad, fearful, you know, anxious, depressed, all of that. And I did that. I allowed myself for that 1 week.
I remember.
And after the 1 week, I said, okay, game on, bitches. Game on. Because I wasn't going to allow myself to go down that rabbit hole again, because that neural thermostat was set a little higher at this point. And I think every bump in the road that we go through gives us the opportunity to reset that neural thermostat, to press the reset button, to say, okay, I've been there before. I now have that conceptual idea. We no longer have that experiential blindness.
Yep.
I can see the snake now.
Yep.
Right? I don't see just black and white blobs.
That's right.
It's just, it's fascinating. So, all right, my dear, we got like 5 minutes left, and we wanted to tell everyone about, Michelle and I came up with a beautiful free masterclass on going from chaos to clarity. And if any of you are interested in taking the masterclass, it is going to be on February 17th at 8:30 p.m. We have a website. It is called MB, as in Michelle and Bianca, Well Nest. So well as in wellness, and nest as in feather your nest. So MB Wellnest. And it is, if you want to go and register on there, it's a free masterclass. It's a 1 hour class on going from chaos to clarity. And we would love to have you on there with us. And I know, Michelle, you mentioned something about offering anyone something tonight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wanted to say anyone who's on this wonderful live tonight and would like to do a coaching session with me sometime this month, just contact me and I'll give you a lovely discount for participating tonight.
And how do they find you?
You can email me at michelle@michellecolt.com.
That's right.
Yeah, I get confused. I have so many email addresses,
That's
as you
right.
know.
That's right. That's right. And they can find you on Instagram
You can
at
find me at, yeah, it's Michelle Colt Coach. And
Michelle.
also my website is www.michellecolt.com.
Awesome. All
Yeah,
right,
you know, I really want to encourage everyone to check out our free masterclass. You know, we were able to touch upon so much of the whole chaos aspect because, you know, Bianca and I have both been through tremendous chaos at different times in our lives. And we're really good at helping and guiding others to be able to move through it in a much more resourceful way, you know, to be able to pick up our big girl panties and get on with life, so to speak, as she did so beautifully at the beginning of the pandemic. And also, we have a wonderful newsletter that we put together on our website. Bianca put it together, which if you subscribe, you'll then be in our lovely database and you'll find out whenever we're doing anything. We're very, very excited about this new business venture of ours. I mean, I'm the, you know, the mind emotion aspect and she's the body aspect. And a lot of our work that we'll be doing and putting out there in the world is going to have this really inherited trauma piece as the foundation, which cannot be talked about enough, in our opinion.
No, the truth will set you free.
Yes, the truth will indeed set you free.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
Yep. So thank you so much, my beautiful sister-in-law, sister in soul.
My pleasure.
Piece of my heart. Yes. Thank you guys so much. I mean, honestly, wait, somebody wrote something. Wait, hold on. For a lot of people who have never thought about their mental health before, 2020 was a huge game changer and learning experience. This year is starting the same. Look for the positive things. Absolutely. And this Jennifer here is recovering from surgery right now, and the fear comment of the pain was helpful.
Oh, good.
Good. You know, it's fear, false emotion, false evidence appearing real. It's just an illusion.
Just an illusion. And the pain is temporary.
The pain is always temporary.
Yep.
So thank you so much. And if you want to find me, you can find me at sundala.com, Sundala. You can just kind of go up into my profile. You'll see the link up there. You can.
I have to tell you guys, if this is your first one you're tuning into, these things are ridiculous that Bianca is doing. My husband had a wonderful appointment with one of her previous guests on this because Bianca had her on as a guest. So this is amazing what she's doing and putting out there, and it's just so beautiful.
And my calendar of amazing people is set all the way into June. So yeah, I'm so excited. So next week you're going to meet actually another family member of mine, my beautiful sister. She is a nutritional therapy practitioner and an attorney, and she's just this really awesome, very knowledgeable, just so super intelligent around nutrition and therapy around that. So tune in next week. I believe it is also Wednesday night at 8:30, and you know where to find us. So please, everyone, Integrative Wellness Collective. It's all about being well, and join the collective, and join me here every Wednesday night. So thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
Okay.